It was the summer of 2018 when a group of my friends and I decided to go camping. We had all been friends since high school, and after a few years of working, we thought it would be the perfect time to reconnect and escape the hustle of city life. The idea was simple: pack our tents, sleeping bags, and a cooler full of food, and head to a remote spot in the mountains to camp under the stars. We chose a secluded location called Camp Bear Creek, a quiet place known for its picturesque views, running streams, and tall pine trees. It seemed like the perfect place to relax. We set off early on a Saturday morning, and the drive was peaceful, filled with laughs and anticipation for the weekend ahead. As we neared the campsite, the landscape around us started to change. The roads became narrower and the trees grew denser. Finally, we arrived at Camp Bear Creek, which was nestled in a small valley surrounded by dense forest on all sides. The first few hours were filled with the usual camping activities, setting up tents, gathering firewood, and grilling hot dogs. It felt great to be away from technology and the busy world. The air was fresh, and the forest was so still that it felt as though time had slowed down. By dusk, we had our campfire going, and the sky above was dotted with stars. We sat around the fire, laughing and telling stories, with the sound of the nearby creek providing a soothing backdrop. As the night wore on, one by one, everyone started to get sleepy and went to their tents to sleep. I decided to stay up for a while longer to enjoy the solitude of the wilderness. As I sat near the fire, the forest seemed eerily quiet. No crickets chirped, and no animals rustled in the trees. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the gentle flow of the creek. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I chalked it up to the cold night air. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up on me, but then I heard something, a faint sound like footsteps. They were coming from the trees across the creek, just beyond the reach of the campfire's light. I stood up, trying to make out any movement, but the forest was completely still. My heart began to race. It was probably an animal, I reasoned, maybe a deer or something else, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me it was something more. Trying to brush off the unease, I decided to go to bed, but as I lay in my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence outside was oppressive, almost unnatural. My friends were all asleep in their tents, unaware of the strange feeling that had settled over me. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaky. They all groggily replied that they hadn't heard anything and seemed skeptical of my fear. But as I glanced around, something caught my eye. A faint figure standing near the edge of the trees. I blinked, unsure if it was a trick of the light, but the figure remained. A tall figure dressed in dark clothes, standing perfectly still, watching us. I called out to it, but it didn't move. My friends followed my gaze and saw the figure too. We were all frozen in place, unsure of what to do. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure turned and disappeared into the trees. We decided that we needed to leave, but our cars were parked a short distance away, and it would have been dangerous to walk through the dark woods in the middle of the night. We gathered our belongings, packed our tents in record time, and huddled near the fire, too scared to sleep. As we waited for daylight, we heard strange noises. branches snapping, the rustle of leaves, as if something or someone was moving through the woods around us. But whenever we shined our flashlights into the trees, there was nothing there. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the first light of dawn broke through the trees. We quickly packed up the rest of our things and drove off, the eerie atmosphere of the camp lingering behind us. The drive back home was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, unable to shake the strange events that had unfolded that night. Over the following weeks, we tried to convince ourselves that it was just our imaginations running wild, but something about that night didn't feel right. We learned later that Camp Bear Creek had a history. A local legend told of a man who had gone missing in the woods decades ago. He was never found, and people believed he had been lost to the wilderness. But some locals also whispered that the man had never left the forest, and that his spirit still roamed the land, watching anyone who dared to camp there. Was it just a coincidence, or had we truly encountered something unexplainable? To this day, none of us know for sure, but we all agree on one thing. We've never been back to Camp Bear Creek. The memories of that night, the footsteps, the figure in the trees, and the feeling of being watched continue to haunt us every time we think about it. Some experiences, no matter how much we try to forget them, stay with us forever.